The NBA aims to blow up tanking. 3 new dramatic proposals that will completely change the way the league works. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. We're going to break down these 3 proposals, explain what they are and what they would mean, including some of the negative consequences that could occur in the NBA. Joining me, Donnie Freeman. Donnie, the NBA, Adam Silver made it very clear tanking is going to be a thing of the past. Now, keep in mind, all these rules will go into effect next season, and the NBA is going to meet at the Board of Governors meeting in May to decide upon them. So nothing is done yet, and nothing is going to affect the draft for this year. This is starting for next year. But, man, it looks like we're going to see a very different NBA starting next season.
Yeah, like initially when we heard about this stuff, we were thinking it was going to be like, the following season, et cetera. But not the one after the next one.
Sure.
But yeah, it seems like they're really trying to fast track this thing. And like we said when this initially came out, are they going to get that confirmation bias from the jump, the following season, right?
Because the draft class is not nearly as strong next year as this year. So there's just naturally not as much incentive to take. So the NBA, whatever plan they pick, there's 3 plans we're going to go over right now. Whatever plan they pick, the NBA is going to be able to point to what happens next season and say, see, it worked, when that was going to be the case no matter what, because the draft class is not as good. There's not as much incentive. And that really is at the root of the issue. It's that right now in the NBA, you are rewarded for being good. In fact, it's seen as the best path to getting good is to get a bunch of top picks. And the way you get top picks is by losing. Therefore, losing is incentivized. Let's take a look at these plans and see if any of them actually touches at the heart of the issue here and de-incentivizes losing. While at the same time, you have to make sure that you don't create a system by which a team is just stuck on the bottom forever and can't get that leg up to be lifted out. All right, here's the first plan. Proposal 1, the bottom 10 teams that miss the play-in tournament and the 8 that qualify for it will all be part of the draft lottery. So that means teams 7 through 15 in each conference would be part of the lottery. So you're expanding the lottery by 4 slots. And then if you're a bottom 10 team, so a non-play-in team, you get an equal 8% chance of moving up in the lottery. The remaining 20% of the odds then get split between the 8 play-in teams. So they would get a 2.5% shot at moving up in the draft lottery. And all 18 spots would be drawn in that format. So real world, what we're talking about here, Donnie, is right now in the Eastern Conference, the Philadelphia 76ers through the Indiana Pacers would all be in the lottery. In the West, it would be the Phoenix Suns through the Sacramento Kings right now, but seeds 7 through 10 would only have a 2.5% shot at moving up, whereas the bottom 5 would all have an equal 8% shot at moving up. Essentially, this is using the play-in as the lottery or as the tanking mechanism that would stop teams from tanking. Do you think this would work?
I think there's pros and cons to every proposal that was brought forward from Shams today. I think this could work. I see some holes in it though. Like, what if a team is just, organically a bad team, and they're not able to really get better because the odds there, are spread out more evenly. And then also another thing that I might find a bit of a problem with is, what about the teams that are on the verge of like being a play-in team towards the end? Are like, we'll kind of tank because we're right there. It doesn't encourage mediocrity, a little bit for some of these teams. I think
exactly 100%. So right now we've got an NBA where yes, you are incentivized to lose. And keep in mind, they've already flattened the lottery odds to a degree. In fact, the bottom 3 picks, they all have the same odds of getting the number 1 overall pick. That's what they've done. And obviously that has not been enough. That's not worked. However, Donnie, this is the problem that I have with this system. The idea of completely flattening the odds for everybody that doesn't make the play-in, in addition to giving lottery odds to play-in teams, is it goes against what the NBA is pushing for, and that is parity. So if parity is the goal in the NBA, it's something that they're working towards, more teams feeling like they've got a shot, that means that you're going to have some pretty good teams that are 7 through 10. So you are providing a lessened sting for making the plan, because nobody wants to make the plan. You look at the East right now, you've got this massive battle between the Atlanta Hawks, Toronto Raptors, Philadelphia 76ers, Orlando Magic, Charlotte Hornets, Miami Heat, right? All fighting to not be in the plan. You get this huge battle to not be in the plan. Now you're going to have that little bit of a silver lining. Well, we're a play-in team, but we get a 2.5% shot at potentially winning the lottery, about getting a franchise-changing player. Should the goal be to make being in the play-in feel a little bit better? Because that, to me, feels like the biggest thing that's accomplished here, at the risk of taking a team that probably shouldn't get a number 1 overall pick and handing it to that club.
Yeah, I think that's a fine line to walk, because like I was saying, what if we have a very tight 10-11? Are they just going to decide, hey, let's tank because I'd rather get that 8% shot instead of just going out in the first round? Like that's where I think it's a little bit tricky. Like, we don't see that this year because there's a very clear difference between 10-11. So that's not a factor for the standing so far this season. But I do wonder about that. And yeah, I think that they're trying to figure out a way to make the play-in more palatable for teams and make teams want to try to be in that range more by giving them that odd. But again, what about the actually bad teams that are just organizationally bad? Like, for example, no strays, and I'm not intending it, but like the Kings, for example, like they're going to have the same shot as like all these teams to get that top pick, so.
Well, and that's the other thing here that I don't like is one of the criticisms. Well, yes, one of the criticisms of the lottery right now too is that teams will be bad for a year. Drop down for you. Look at what the Indiana Pacers are doing right now. Look at what the Spurs did to tank to get Wemby. They were bad for a couple of years, but still, the Thunder were bad for a few years. They got some top picks, right?
They just got mad at you. The fan base just got mad at you.
I know. Well, they're always mad at me, so whatever. Look, this is now taking a system like this where you're still allowing teams to be bad for a year, drop down, get a top pick, and now you only have to drop down to 11th. It makes it that much easier. Now you only have to drop down to 11th, and you have an 8% shot at the number 1 pick. Imagine, let's say Golden State doesn't have Steph Curry. Let's say the West was a little bit different this year, and it wasn't a clear delineation between the 11 and the 10 the way it is right now, right? And Golden State, let's say they're only half a game up on New Orleans. If you're the Warriors, if you're whoever, if you're the Blazers, you would say, screw this.
Yep.
I don't want to be if I'm the 10 seed, I have to win 2 games in a row, and then I get to go get my ass kicked by the Thunder. That's my prize. No, I'll take my 8% chance at landing AJ DeBonsa to pair up with Steph Curry. Let's tank. Yep. I don't think this necessarily is going to fix the problem here when we look at tanking. And I think there could be some significant unintended consequences that could see a team that is pretty good getting the number 1 overall pick, whether it's via that 8% shot or that 2.5% shot.
That's absolutely going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to see a random team that's like just had a bad injury luck season wind up getting like a top 1-2 pick or something like that and be like, oh, well, all of a sudden they're going to shoot towards the top of the standings. And I don't know if that's exactly what they want, but conversely, you're going to see the teams that struggle to be good stay bad because they can't get those picks either. And that's the core design of the draft lottery, is to give the teams that are actually bad an opportunity to get these guys so they can stop being bad. Yeah. But, obviously we've manipulated the system with teams dropping down for one reason or another and just intentionally being bad. But sometimes teams actually struggle to land the guys that they need. They struggle with the draft decisions, things like that. So they're the most penalized in this. So I do wonder about that. But this is just the first of 3 proposals.
Yeah, let's get to the second one here, which does address the idea of a team just dropping down for one season. Yeah. And this is what it says. The second proposal, the bottom 10 teams that miss the play-in tournament, the 8 that qualify for it, and the 4 playoff teams that lose in the first round will be included in the lottery. So 22 teams in the lottery, and will be ranked according to their record across 2 seasons. And it's going to weight their record in the prior 2 seasons. However, there's also a minimum floor so that teams won't feel like they need to lose every game possible for 2 straight seasons. So, for example, if they go 14-68, the floor, let's say, is 20, then that team would be treated as though they won 20 games for that season. So you would have to be bad for multiple seasons. Of course, Donnie, my initial thought is the drawback is, wouldn't teams just, if you really were dedicated to being bad, right, and to get the best pick possible, wouldn't teams just, once they hit 20 games, start tanking like crazy?
It's probably
right. I mean, no matter what we do, some teams are going to find a way around these rules.
Yeah. What about if, a contender, conversely, what if they wind up losing a superstar for one season? And this is the Indiana Pacers here.
Sure.
Where to be fair, they went on a very strong post-deadline run, but we didn't have them as contenders prior to that. Anyway, what if a contending team is, unfortunately, they're down a superstar for a season or something, and they're actually trapped by the record from last season? Like, that also kind of sucks, but that's exactly what this is trying to stop, that like flash tanking type where you come in for a year and just, like we talked about a lot with the other rule, but that would suck too, though,
Yeah, that's where the NBA's got to be careful with things like this. And we're talking about 2 seasons. If you are just okay, you could have a team that's just okay, that's middle of the pack one year, and then awful the next year, and actually have pretty high odds, like, relative to other teams at landing the top pick. And again, they may not really be all that bad, and then they could wind up, because it's a 2-year window, they could wind up getting a little better the next year, get that really big player in the draft that's not quite making a huge impact, but everybody knows they're going to be great, like the Mavs with Cooper Flag this year, right? Tank one more year, and off you go, right? You land the player 1 year, tank one more season. Now you've got really good odds the next season at getting another player to pair with that guy. And next thing you know, you've got 2 top tier stud level players to build around. So
I think with this system, you've got to have multi-year tanking,
which is less palatable for owners to sign off and say, okay, we're going to be bad for multiple years. It's much more, what I like about this is it's much more tolerable to say, we're going to be bad for 1 year and then we're going to be right back.
Yeah, for sure. I think with this one, the only real way is to come out bad for multiple years and go from there. But what about let's say a small market team loses their star and they don't really have the ability to improve other than the draft, so are they telling these teams that being too bad doesn't really give them any extra help, because all this stuff is kind of flattened out anyway?
Yeah. That could be it too, right? Where a team that's legitimately bad doesn't really get the help that they need. But that's part of the problem right now too, is the NBA is looking at this and they're saying, you know what, because losing is incentivized, we're supposed to be helping teams that are legitimately bad. The problem is we essentially now have teams pretending to be bad so that they can also get the leg up and get the superstar. And it's understandable why I don't fault any team for doing that, because we're talking about not just wins on the floor. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, right? That's also what we're talking about here, that your organization will get if you get the guy, right? That's how much. And that's the other piece to this, where the NBA is a little bit different than a lot of the other leagues, where one player makes all the difference. I don't think there's anything else like it across sports, with the exception of maybe getting the star quarterback in the NFL, right? You get the guy in the NFL draft that can completely change your team. Other than that, I don't know that there's anything like this across the other sports, where one player makes so much of a difference. And that's part of why tanking is such a big problem in the NBA. But they want to make sure that you don't just have a team pretend to be bad. And I think by averaging it out over a few years, maybe you should even increase that, say over 3 years, that is going to, I think, help guarantee that the teams that are actually bad are going to be getting the top players, not just the teams that are pretending to be bad.
Or do we have a situation where teams, they're targeting the floor?
I think that could be a thing too.
That's where it's another little, is that what you want? But again, it comes down to, are you okay with multiple years of tanking? Especially if you're a good team, like I was mentioning earlier, that lost a smart player, you want to get back in it, but otherwise, this is designed to stop those teams. But otherwise, do you target the floor? You just stay bad, make sure that you don't get these guys. Shoot, maybe you don't have the market size to get some of these guys, but I think that's where it's tricky.
It's just like where with the last one where we talked about, well, teams would you would tank out of the 10 seed to get to 11th and almost 4x your chance of moving up, right?
That's
but in this one, you would be targeting, okay, we got to 20 wins.
Now let's
hit the brakes. Hit the brakes.
Stop.
All right. The third proposal, a 5x5 method. This is the last one. In this one, the same 18 teams from the first proposal. So the bottom 10 that missed the play-in plus the 8 that make the play-in would be in the lottery. And the teams with the 5 worst records would all have the same odds. So initially, my immediate thought there, Donnie, is, well, teams will tank to be bottom 5. And with them descending from there, there would be a lottery drawing for each of the top 5 picks. So there's a lottery drawing that includes 18 teams with the bottom 5 all having the highest odds. And then after the first 5 picks are selected, there's another lottery for the remaining teams. But if any of the teams with the 5 worst records didn't land a top 5 spot, which can happen, then they are guaranteed the next 5 slots. They would get 6 through 10 if all 5 of them were bumped. And so that's to try to make sure that no team that is really, really bad winds up with like the 18th pick just because of bad luck in the lottery or the contempt of the basketball gods there.
This one seems like it's going to be ripe for conspiracy theories.
What do you think the conspiracies would be?
Just rigging.
Right. To get, I mean, because we're talking about a system where, again, let's say it plays out that way. All right. The 7 seed is now in the lottery. Like there would be the potential for the Phoenix Suns to get the number 1 overall pick.
Oof,
that could happen.
That's interesting.
There'd be potential for Philly. Let's say Atlanta has been on this crazy run. They're not clear of the 7 seed. They drop a couple of games. They get set. Now, most teams, though, again, the thing I like is that teams will not want to drop into the play-in. Yeah. But again, this does provide a little bit of it eases the pain of being a play-in team of it, because you can say, well, we get a chance. But like, imagine the Hawks get the number 1 pick, right? Yeah. Like that's something that can happen now. Under that kind of a system. And again, when we talk about the bottom 5, there's a real incentive to be in the, if you are the 6th worst, right? You're going to tank like crazy to try to get in that bottom 5 and guarantee that at worst, you're going to get a top 10 pick. Plus you're going to have an equal percentage shot at getting the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. And then also, what if you don't get the top 5s and you get put in the second 5? What if it's a top heavy draft? That sucks.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad, because like the talent disparity from even like 1 to 6 is probably drastic in those drafts.
So which of those options do you like the best of the 3 options?
Well, as you could tell, there's ways to rip apart all of these, but there's never going to be a perfect solution.
Exactly. There's always going to be something
that you would have to do multiple things, like multiple of these combined to try to patch anything, which would probably be too complicated. Right. To answer the question, probably proposal 1 I like the best overall, but
and would it change the way teams protect picks too in trades? And maybe that's another piece to this, is that they need to change pick protection, because otherwise, like, let's say they go to the 3rd one, everybody's going to top 5 protect their pick.
Oh, hell yeah.
Right.
Hell yeah. Because if it's top 5, that's free money right there.
Right. Exactly. So that's the other, challenge with doing something like this. But proposal 1, the one that you like, and they're going to vote on in May, is just going to 18 lottery spots with the bottom 10 teams have an 8% chance. And so if you have a 2.5% chance, you could say, well, you're getting a 2.5% chance, but you're a play-in team. But you get to be in the play-in. That's your incentive. That's the benefit to you. You get the play-in revenue, maybe playoff revenue. The other teams that didn't quite make it. But like we said, if you're sitting in the 10 seed, I think there's some real incentive to say, no thanks. We'll bow out of the play-in and we'll take an 8% shot at number 1 overall.
with this one, you got to really hope that ownership group really values that quick money that they would get from a couple playoff games or whatever,
Yeah.
Even though the long-term money they'd get from a top pick is obviously much better. So, but you got to really hope they care about that a lot. But yeah, like I said, it's splitting hairs for me because I didn't think any of these are particularly great.
No.
They all have holes. And number 2 is interesting as well. I just feel like with all of these, though, the core theme is that they're making it to where if you force your way to the bottom, they're evening things out more, right? Which they had already instated a few years back by evening out those bottom slots anyway. But and so I do wonder if for certain teams that are just naturally bad and have historically been naturally bad and aren't artificially bad, right? No shots at anybody there, but are they really screwed by all these systems?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing, right? The teams that actually need the help, there's no way right now to differentiate between the teams that are pretending to need the help, and you're going to punish them by lowering their ability to add that top tier talent. I do like
super lucky.
Yes, I do like to combat that. I like the idea of making it a multi-year thing. Of making it, you have to be bad for multiple years. Because I do think that, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe teams will go to great lengths and they'll say, you know what, screw it, we'll be bad for multiple years. We'll do that.
You know what? What if it's a situation where a team trades away their star player in order to just do a rebuild because things aren't working out? They trade it, like, for example, similar to what Memphis did this year.
Yeah.
And they're projecting to be bad anyway for a couple of years. That's kind of interesting. Or maybe they just don't want to pay the salary, for their main guy because they don't think they're worth that deal.
And so then they wind up just committing to, hey, we're going to be bad for the next 2 years anyway.
Yeah.
Let's get to 20 wins, hit the brakes, and then because that's what we'd be credit. Even if we won 10 games, they're going to treat us as though we win 20. I mean, I guess in that situation, it keeps a team from having like a 10-win season or something. Say, well, might as well win 20, but they're going to win 20, and then it's going to be obvious that they're going to start. Suddenly, all these players are hurt as soon as they hit 20 wins. However, check this out. This is the final thing. If this is from Joe Varden of The Athletic, if a team under the new rules was still found by Adam Silver's office to be tanking, he would be able to take away that team's draft pick, move it to the end of the lottery or first round, and also increase fines into the millions of dollars. So that to me is a slippery slope, though, because that Adam Silver has to unilaterally decide, is this team tanking or not? And if so, could punish them severely for doing so. So if they do hit the brakes at, let's say, 20 wins in the second proposal, Adam Silver could come in and go, nope, you just lost your draft pick.
Yeah. Define tanking.
That's it, right? That's the problem.
What is tanking?
That's the problem. I mean, right, is the Wizards with Trae Young.
Yeah.
Could teams look at that and say, well, he's not really that hurt? But then who's to decide that? How hurt a player really is? Does the league have to start sending in their own independent medical personnel to verify what teams are saying? Look at the Giannis situation, right? Where the Bucks don't want to play him. He wants to play. The Players Association wants the NBA to send in independent medical personnel to say that, yes, he can play. That, to me, that, and we have to remember, too, the power dynamic. Adam Silver works for the owners, not the other way around. But that feels like a lot of power on something that could be determined by a matter of perspective.
Yeah, I just don't know if this part of it all will get approved because I don't think there's a clear-cut definition of tanking. It's pretty subjective. And what about a situation like I mentioned earlier where a team trades their star player? Obviously, they're going to be tanking from there, and that's the intention because they need to rebuild. You could call it what you want, rebuild, tank, whatever, but the goal is to build this thing over from the ground up, and you need high picks to do that. So you will effectively be tanking for years on end. And will you get penalized for that? Right. You know what? Actually, you brought up the Wizards. I think they're actually interesting in all of this because I wonder if we see more situations where teams are trying to trade those guys and you have these teams where their only recourse is to trade for them because they don't have the cachet for one reason or another, the market size, whatever, to get these guys ordinarily on the free agent market. And maybe they just have to trade for some of these guys because they can't get the draft picks. They can't. So
the teams that are legitimately bad will say, we don't have any. We're not. There is no end to this. The only way to end this is to go get a player that's undervalued, maybe an older player, an overpaid player, whatever, and add them to our team.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we don't have any kind of assurance that we're going to get one of the better picks in the draft.
Yeah, unless Adam Silver is just going to instate a system where, like, if you're bad for X number of years, or you have a record of XYZ over the last 10 years, you get a boosted chance.
No matter what happens, there's going to be a counter. There's going to be a way, and teams will find the ways, right? No matter what he does, teams are going to find loopholes and they're going to figure out ways to game the system. That's the way it's going to be, because there's incentive to do that. Whatever there's incentive to do, teams are going to do, with a lot of money, with a lot of success and all of that on the line. Donnie, look, very clear. The NBA has decided tanking is a very bad thing and something that they want to do away with. I don't know that any of these proposals necessarily accomplish that. I think there could be dire consequences, maybe unforeseen consequences to these. And I think we've already seen that play out with teams like the Mavs, the Spurs getting top picks when maybe they shouldn't have. My concern is that with all of these, we're effectively increasing the chance that a team that does not need a top pick is going to get one, just in the name of punishing teams that are bad or making themselves look worse than they actually are.
Bad, right? Like, what is a bad team? Are they intentionally bad? What's it's all slippery.
This could wind up. Look, the NBA is going to look very different next year. Will this stop tanking? I don't know. I think that tanking is not going to be as big of a problem next year, regardless. So the NBA is going to look at whatever happens next season and go, "Yep, it works." We won't know if it truly works until we get a really strong draft class and we see do teams start tanking 2 years in. If there's a Wemby out there, are you telling me a team wouldn't tank 2 years in advance to get Wemby? Hell yeah, they would. Hell yeah, they would.
They're already scouting those prospects now, but they're gonna line up everything, and they're gonna do it in a way where it's like, all right, we want to rebuild a couple years from now. We're gonna trade XYZ now. We're gonna get these guys off the books and start lining things up in advance. If that multi-year one gets approved and stuff like that. So there's just ways, but I mean, that's for them to figure out, right? I think that if you sit down with a bunch of smart people to figure out these proposals, you've got to also think about all the potential ramifications and ways that teams can manipulate the system to get what they want out of it. And if you are going to give Adam Silver that power, I think you need a very clear guideline on what parameters you're looking at. Like, because it's too arbitrary. He can just say, "No, I don't like what you're doing. You're sitting XYZ tonight. You're tanking. Give me that draft pick." And he might want to make an example out of somebody. I don't. Right. I don't know about that.
How do you define tanking? It would have to be some very strict definition of what that is. That's a lot of power for Adam Silver. You sat a dude on the second night of a back-to-back. Draft pick is gone. See you later. No, I mean,
insane.
That's obviously an extreme example, but there would need to be some very specific ways to prove a team is tanking if you're going to give them the power to disappear a team's draft pick if they are believed to be tanking.
Like Chauncey's allegations where he was supposedly, pulling guys at the end of games and all that stuff from last summer. Like, you'd have to investigate that pretty well. So,
all right, everybody, give us your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of the 3 tanking plans the NBA is going to vote upon? Which one should win? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Till next time, see ya and stay safe.